Welcome back to the latest edition of The Audible, presented by Trader Joe's. I am Bruce Feldman, joined as always by my colleagues from The Athletic, Stuart Mandel and Ralph Russo. Don't forget to check out every episode of the show, which is now on YouTube. Find us at youtube.com/@audibleshow. Join us live every Sunday morning in season at 11:30 a.m. Eastern Time, 8:30 a.m. Pacific, as we break down everything that happened from the weekend. Guys, we have a lot to get into. Ralph's going to join us as we're going to break down his AP ballot in a minute, but we're also going to talk about some big upsets that we think are going to happen, and a lot to get into. But let's start with what we have issues with Ralph's ballot. Ralph, what was different about this week compared to last week for you?
So what I'm learning as a first-time voter is you're trying to, early in the season, lean into results. People want you to vote on results. Oh, this team did this, but you have so few results, and you also have so few results that actually matter. When 60 to 70% of the games are not even real games, if you lean too much into results, that doesn't necessarily make a ton of sense either, right? When you have a bunch of mismatches, forget about just Ohio State Grambling. That's not even a game. That's barely a scrimmage for Ohio State. But even LSU, Louisiana Tech, Penn State, FIU. I know neither LSU or Penn State played all that well, but they were never threatened. I don't know if either team, are they playing guys who they may not normally play as many snaps, get a couple more freshmen? I just feel like it's hard to gauge how meaningful that game should be or how much I should take from it. So I tend not to take much at all from it. The one team that got a little bit of a scare in quotes was Clemson, because they fell behind on Troy early, 16-0, gave up a big play on the first series, had a fumble and an interception that led to points. So all of a sudden, Clemson found itself in a hole. But even with that game, I don't know, there was never any doubt in my mind that Clemson was going to win it. So the early season ranking becomes complicated because you want to lean into results, but so few results really mean anything.
So Ralph, I think you did a good job. I know that the people on Reddit think you're being a little bit too much of an outlier, but fine by me. If anything, let's do less groupthink. But Bruce and I do each have one nitpick. I'm going to let Bruce go first.
All right. For me, Ralph, it's the team it's a reference to the team you actually talked about a couple of seconds ago, and that is Clemson. Lost at home to LSU, and Cade Klubnik did not play well in that game, and he didn't actually play very well in the game that they had to come back to beat Troy. He just doesn't look right now he looks like a young quarterback still. He's been slow on a lot of stuff. They have a lot of experience on the offensive line. They have not been great. They didn't run it at all against LSU. Adam Randall, a converted receiver, ran it a little better against Troy, but it wasn't like they were, that impressive. And here's Iowa State. Again, I'm a little biased. I can't be too biased because I'm the same idiot who also picked Clemson to win the national title. And I already regret that. But I did pick Iowa State to win the Big 12. They had a nice win over K-State, albeit maybe that doesn't carry as much weight after K-State just lost to Army the way they did. But they did beat K-State. And then last weekend, good win against a Big Ten team, Iowa. You still have them pretty far, 3 or 4 teams below the Clemson team that you don't think is very good. Are you snubbing Matt Campbell? What are you doing?
Yeah, maybe a little bit. I mean, this is the argument that fans make, right? I didn't have, even though Iowa State was ranked in the preseason, I didn't have them ranked in the preseason. So are my preseason priors showing up a little too much here? Because, again, resume wise, should Iowa State be ahead of Clemson? Clemson did lose to LSU. I mean, that's a pretty, again, it kind of goes back to, we only have 2 games to pick from here. How much do I want to penalize Clemson for losing to a team that might be a top 10-ish that I currently have number 2 because of the win at Clemson, right? I want to reward LSU for beating Clemson, but how much do I then penalize Clemson for losing to LSU? I can get what you're saying. Yeah, the funny thing is with Clemson, I had them 11 this week. The only thing I'm regretting with Clemson, and I'm comfortable with them ahead of Iowa State, because again, like I don't read too much into them struggling with Troy. I'm not huge on Iowa, so that win, that kind of muddled win, I can kind of see like Clemson still being ahead of Iowa State, on the strength of that. What I don't necessarily want to do too much is penalize Clemson for Troy. And maybe that's not fair. Maybe I should. But again, I find myself with those types of games feeling like I don't know if we're really gaining that much information. I think back to, I think it was 2016 Clemson team, which I think they either won the national championship or they played in the national championship game. It was during that streak of when they were playing Alabama every year. That year, Clemson won a low-scoring game to start the season against Auburn. And the very next week, they played like a 1-score game against Troy. Now, that might have been a slightly better Troy team, but they still played a 1-score game against Troy. And again, Clemson went on to have a great season. I think we overreact a little bit to these early season games because we have nothing else to react to. And as much as you want to lean into results, I think sometimes you can overreact to those games so much that all of a sudden 2 weeks from now, I'm looking at it going like even now I find myself thinking like, why do I have LSU as number 2? Like, did I really need to do I almost regret that I made such a strong move early on. So I don't know if that's
but it's a really good win. That was an impressive win. Nussmeier played well. The defense with Blake Baker's guys, they looked much better. I get why you drank some Kool-Aid there. I drank it too.
But you know what you end up doing though, Bruce, is you end up rewarding sequencing, right? Like because they had that win early in the season and we didn't have a lot more information. Now I bump LSU to this big jump to number 2. And as a couple of weeks go by, you start looking at the rest of the country going like, is that really the number 2 team in the country?
At least you're going on something, Ralph. At least you're going off of something.
Fair, very fair. So, yeah, am I sliding Iowa State a little bit because of my preseason priors? You can make that argument. As of right now, I still feel pretty good about Clemson being a top 10-ish team. In fact, if anything, what I regret is not having them a little lower to start the season as opposed to the number 6 I had them at in the preseason. What you got, Stu?
I don't know. The Michigan fans might get on me again because they're already mad at me about Connor Stallions, but
you are a Buckeye at heart.
Exactly.
You grew up in the state, so I mean,
And I've seen the tattoo you have on association.
Your shoulder. Brutus on his.
I just became such a huge Andy Katzenmoyer fan that I just never let it go. So we had the game the other night, Oklahoma, Michigan. High hopes for Bryce Underwood and whatnot. Look, they didn't get blown out of the building, but they didn't really. I mean, they scored 13 points, and so when I saw you had them at number 17. I thought for a second, should they even be in the top 25? I mean, we're talking about a win over New Mexico is basically their signature achievement so far. But even if you're like, yeah, I'm not going to throw in the towel yet. They didn't get blown out by Oklahoma. I think that's probably 4 or 5 spots too high.
And the voters agree, like the consensus agrees with you, Stu. I think Michigan was about 23 this weekend. So I am ahead of the curve on Michigan. I was ahead on the curve on Michigan to start the season. And again, it keeps going back to the same thing. People will be like, well, you have to throw out your preseason priors because now there are actually results. But there are so few results. If you completely throw out your preseason priors, that doesn't make sense either, right? Like you're throwing away information and using less information if you do that. If I don't have some kind of preseason expectation evaluation baked into week 2 rankings, the number of games I'm going on that are actually meaningful are so small. You're right. In a couple of weeks, I could realize, wow, Michigan's just really not that good. And I was just wrong on Michigan. And that, which would in some ways also make me a little wrong on Oklahoma. I'm ahead of the curve on Oklahoma. I have Oklahoma in my top 10 this week. I think I had them 8. So as we said, like, I'm a bit of a deviant voter, right? Like, if you look at the Reddit
it doesn't seem all that unusual. I mean, your ballot, when you told us that, I was like, really? It doesn't seem all that unusual. I mean, even these ones that Bruce and I are calling out are like minor beefs.
Yeah. Well, what it does is it doesn't take many votes that are really outside the norm to swing this, right? I think it's a couple of standard deviations, and I am sort of in the bottom 10 if you rank them into the most outlier, or what was the word that you used before? I can't remember now, Bruce, but like the most unusual compared to
contrarian. You're the contrarian.
Yeah, I'm the contrarian compared to consensus among the top 10 contrarians. But again, it only takes like, hey, I'm not as high on South Carolina. South Carolina's 10. I have them at like 16 or 18. That's a big deal when doing that process. So yes, I'm leaning into the fact that early in the season, I started the year with Michigan like 11 or 12 and Oklahoma 13. So in my mind, that's a big game. The winner gets a nice bump, and the loser, I don't want to punish too much, just like with LSU and Clemson. Now, that game was more of a consensus big game, but I still look at it as 2 highly ranked teams. So I'm not going to punish Michigan too much for losing on the road, but I do want to reward Oklahoma for winning against a team that I think is a good team.
Can I ask you something here, Ralph? So some of my other coworkers on the Fox side, they have Oregon this weekend. They've watched a lot of film on Oregon from the first 2 games. Now, look, Oklahoma State is a horror and is a really struggling Big 12 team right now, but they're also not like an FCS opponent. But they lost 69-3. It was 69-3 in the third quarter. They got annihilated. Some of my coworkers feel like Oregon is a team that looks like a legit national title contender. And they like their chances from what they're seeing, how Dante Moore has operated. The defense looks really nasty. They're really deep in the run game. They have a rebuilt offensive line with a bunch of transfers who have kind of hit the ground running. You have them number 7. So from your perspective, is this, I need to see a lot more than just one game against a kind of struggling, kind of reeling or Oklahoma State program on the road? Or you're just like, hey, I don't think we know that much. Whatever the film may say, it's not against anybody very good.
So 2 things. I had Oregon 9 to start the season, looking more and more like I was wrong on that was too low, right? Like that's definitely, they have been humming at a rate that Georgia, Penn State, some of these other teams that have started easy have not been humming. Now, though I do say like they clearly were pretty motivated to stick it to Mike Gundy in Oklahoma State last week. Oklahoma State, I think, is probably in the running for the worst Power 4 team in the country. I think, again, whether they are that or not, I'm not 100% sure, but I think they probably are, they're given some signs that they might be in that conversation. The other thing, too, is when you start jumping to, so I've moved Oregon up each of the last 2 weeks. They've moved up a spot each of the last 2 weeks. But part of the reason why I'm a little hesitant is, do I punish Georgia and Penn State? And those are the two teams that I think are equal, right, to where Oregon has been. Because some of these other teams that are in that same area have also played bigger games, right? Ohio State is number 1. They won against Texas. LSU is number 2. They beat Clemson. I have Miami at 5 because they beat Notre Dame. I have Texas still at number 6. Because their only loss is to the number 1 team, and they looked fine against San Jose State. So I get into a little bit of like, well, if I'm going to move Oregon up, what did Penn State or Georgia do to deserve to move back? And to me, nothing really. And I know there are Georgia fans who are going out of their minds because their offensive line didn't play well against Austin Peay. But again, it goes back to this idea of in these games where there is really no competition, no real competition on the other side, is the big team, is the power team, is the highly ranked team. How motivated are they? How much are they just sort of playing with some things, working some things out, hiding some stuff on the playbook? So that's where I was with Oregon. I will admit I might be behind the curve on Oregon. In a couple of weeks, I will look. Maybe I will correct that. But as of right now, it was a balance of Oregon hasn't really played anybody all that strong. So I don't want to necessarily dock Georgia and Penn State, just because Oregon's been better against its patsies than they have.
So as much as I enjoyed that 10-minute discussion on whether Oregon should be 9th or 7th, I think we should probably turn the page to week 3, and we will do so right after this break. All right, guys, we're going to introduce a new segment. We should probably have introduced it before the season, but as we talk about some of the big games this coming weekend, why not give our picks against the spread? That's what people do, right? I'm told that's to be a sports writer, you have to sign an oath, right? That you will always pick games against the spread. Let's start with the big one in Death Valley, a little smaller after what happened this past weekend, but it's, big rivalry, Florida at LSU. LSU 9.5-point favorite. So obviously one team went on the road and beat Clemson. The other team lost to USF at home, which would make it easy to think this could be a blowout. But Bruce, where are you on this game?
It's a payback game, right? LSU lost that last year. I feel like I would have picked LSU in this game. Anyway, it's in Baton Rouge. I feel like LSU sputtered around a little bit last week. It was 10-0 against Louisiana Tech, maybe knowing that this was ahead, a little bit of a letdown from trap game in between, two big games. I think they'll cover. I don't think they're going to beat them by like 3 touchdowns, though. I think Florida's good enough on the D line to give some problems, but I just like the way Nussmeier's playing. I think their defense can kind of pick up a little bit where USF left off against DJ Lagway. Give me the Tigers and maybe by like 2 touchdowns.
So Florida got more bad news today, as if it needed bad news. McCrary, right? Their defensive edge rusher is going to be out for a while. I hope I'm getting his name right. I do that a lot. I'm just going to warn our podcast audience here.
I tend to get with me.
Yeah. I tend to get very tentative with names. Sometimes I know them and I'm like, oh no, am I getting it right? So again, apologize in advance.
I'll tell you, Ralph, Stu used to refer to you as Rousseau, like a philosopher. So he butchers every name imaginable.
It took me a good 2 years to say Milrow instead of Milrow.
Okay. So a little more bad news. This line, though, is all kinds of funky, right? There's no way this is a 9-point line if Florida even ekes out last week's game. I doubt that this is a 9-point. This just stinks of, hey, we're overreacting to 1 week and Florida is still pretty good, and this rivalry tends to be close. So 9.5 points sounds like a ton. I don't know if I don't know if Florida will win the game. I kind of doubt that, but I will easily take 9.5, almost 10 points in an SEC game between two teams that, I think Florida's still got some talent there. So yeah, I'll happily take those points if I were a betting man, which I am not, by the way. So just to warn you.
I got to think DJ Lagway will play better than he did last week, but that is as we saw in the Clemson game, a lot of dudes up front for LSU. Nothing about that game gave me confidence that Florida can get much going on offense, maybe a little more than last week. So give me LSU in the 9.5.
All right. What do we get next?
Speaking of USF, we've got the biggest game in the history of the CW, gents. The CW has that ACC package, and before the season, ESPN let that USF Miami game slip to them, and now it's a top 25 matchup. Either Vegas is not convinced on USF, or they just think Miami's that good. The Hurricanes are a 17-point favorite. I'll go to you, Bruce.
I think Miami wins, but I don't know if they win by that many. Right. I do like the way Carson Beck's playing. I think this will be an interesting test for Miami's defense with Corey Heatherman, the new defensive coordinator, just because you have such a physical running quarterback in Byron Brown. They have speed at receiver, but I think because the thing that I give him a ton of credit for is, he's a big athletic guy, but he does not turn the ball over, right? He's gone almost 300 passes without an interception. I think he's going to make them work. I think Miami wins this game, maybe by 10 to 14. I don't think they win it by as big as the number. Like, Ralph, are you with me, or you see USF giving them a surprise?
Well, I don't see that. And the reason why I would be somewhat inclined towards even giving this mountain of points is that's a lot to ask of USF to now 3 weeks in a row, every week getting a little tougher. Frankly, I think Miami's better than Florida. To go on the road again, to come up with another big effort again against another team that's really physical, probably even more physical than. So that's the thing. It's not that I think USF has no chance. And I just wonder if we're asking a lot of the Bulls to come out one more time with that amount of intensity, with Miami confident after the Notre Dame game, but also rested after the Bethune-Cookman game. Like, it just seems like a rough spot for Miami. And to a certain degree, I think the fact that—
a rough spot for USF, right?
A rough spot for USF. And to a certain degree, I think it even helps Miami that USF has won these first two games, because you're not going to get a Miami team that's overlooking them. Right now, right. Miami is locked in. Hey, these guys beat Florida. We got to take them seriously. So I love the job Todd Orlando has done with that defense for the first couple of weeks. It was, kind of a buy low hire for Alex Golish. Todd Orlando's, stock was up a few years ago. Probably not quite what it was now, but maybe it's rising again. I just think that's a lot to ask of the Bulls to do this 3 weeks in a row. So I will cautiously give up that huge number and think Miami maybe pulls away in the fourth quarter to get a couple to cover it.
As Lee Corso would say, Ralph, good pick. Good pick.
I know. I thought I was getting not
everything
so fast.
You just said, I agree with 100%. Same exact factors why I will take the U to cover, even though I'm convinced USF's really good, and I think they'll contend for a playoff spot, the Group of 5 playoff spot. But this particular week, I don't think lines up great for them. So now we pivot to Georgia at Tennessee. And this is not the point spread I would have thought it would be before the season. The Dogs are a slight 3.5 point favorite on the road. So let's reverse the order like we're in Uno here. Ralph.
So this also goes back to this idea of like, what we saw over the first couple of weeks, should it influence us quite so much? I remember a season not too long ago. I think it was the second national championship season for Georgia. They kind of had a weird game against, maybe it was Ball State in the first game of the season or the second game of the season. And again, everybody, what's wrong with Georgia? They only won by 24 against a MAC team. And
How do you have this encyclopedic memory of Group of 5 teams that Clemson played in 2016 and Georgia played whatever year you're referring to?
I try to do a little pregame research, but these things stick in my head too, because I feel like they are relevant. I feel like every year we find ourselves in September overanalyzing a bad quarter for a really good team and being like, oh, they look vulnerable. And then by like November, you're like, yeah, they were not vulnerable. They were just messing around trying to find the right lineup. So I wonder if that is influencing this spread too much, right? Tennessee has really looked good. And frankly, like I was a little skeptical about Tennessee coming into the season and compared to what they are. But I also think that this is like, again, I'm not like a sharp bettor here. So please don't think I am. But I do feel like this is a value, right? -3. This may, if Georgia plays a little better in the first couple of weeks of the season, maybe this is 6 or 7, 6.5, 5.5 at 3.5. I'll take the Bulldogs. Yeah, I'll take the Bulldogs to be like, hey, maybe we were playing possum the first couple of weeks and now we're ready to roll.
Yeah, I'm with Ralph. Georgia's expected to get 2 starting offensive linemen, basically the right side of their offensive line, which has been out since pretty much the start of the season. They missed, I think from the first quarter on. That helps because Tennessee had 5 sacks against Syracuse week 1. I just think that when you have that kind of talent to go there, I feel like for the same reasons Ralph said, I think we're going to see a really, really good Georgia come in. Tennessee's been a little more impressive than I thought they would be. I mean, they handled Syracuse. I thought that game would have been closer, but I think Georgia's going to get after them. I like them. I don't think they'll blow them out of the building, but I like them by more than a field goal for sure.
I picked Georgia to go 9-3 before the season. I haven't really seen anything in these 2 games to convince me otherwise. I don't know. Maybe they'll be even worse. Let me give you a quick stat line. Joey Aguilar, the transfer from UCLA by way of Appalachian State, is pass efficiency can be pretty skewed through 2 games. Don't get me wrong, but he's 26th and Gunnar Stockton is 68th. I wonder if maybe if this game doesn't go well, I wonder if Kirby Smart will be like, maybe we should have gotten a Joey Aguilar type guy out of the portal. So I will go straight upset Tennessee over Georgia.
All right. Speaking of upsets, guys, why don't we go off the board a little? Not necessarily off the board, but games that aren't the major games. Each of us should give.
Well, before you do that, I think there's one more we should get to, and that's Texas A&M at Notre Dame. The Irish, a touchdown favorite at home. I'll just say off the bat that A&M, who I was very high on going to the season, is concerning me a little bit. They've played 2 Group of 5 teams, UTSA and Utah State, and they've given up a ton of rushing yards. They are 90th in the country in rushing yards allowed. And even though Notre Dame kind of abandoned that in the first game against Miami, we do know they have 2 really good running backs. So I will take the Irish to cover that 7-point spread.
Interesting. Ralph, as he was saying this, I was thinking, man, Mike Elko will figure that out fast. That's my default there. But I know Notre Dame has a deep running back room. The Irish ended up winning a game I didn't think they would win in College Station last year. I'm going to go with the Irish here to cover. I just feel like I really liked what I saw last week. It feels like a month ago, but from what they had with CJ Carr, tough environment. I feel like this is going to be a good night for the Irish.
Yeah, the rushing stuff does worry me. And UTSA especially ripped off some big plays in that first week against A&M. I always find myself feeling like a Notre Dame hater. Like I tend to pick against them in these big games, maybe because it was the way to go, generally speaking.
Or maybe because you applied and you didn't get in out of Catholic school, out of high school.
In Ralph's defense, honestly, up until last season, that was actually the smart play.
Yeah, thank you very much. And
both of these things can be true, Stu. Both of these things can be true.
I did not apply to Notre Dame. That was way too far away. I stuck with my Jesuit education closer to home in the Bronx and Fordham. I will do the thing where I like that 7 points in this game. That seems like a lot. I would be almost convinced maybe to pick this as my upset, like straight up upset pick. But I'll just take them 7 points. So 7.5, which what was it, Stu? Regardless, I'm going to take 10 points.
We should note these are the BetMGM lines as of Tuesday.
From our friends at BetMGM.
Actually, as of Monday. What am I saying? I've skipped the clock. I like that we brought you on here, Ralph, because when Bruce and I, we would do picks. Oftentimes we would agree on every single one of them. I think I could be wrong that the 2 of you did not agree on a single one.
So we agreed on Georgia. We agreed on Georgia.
You agreed on Georgia, but there was not. There was none that the 3 of us were. Yeah. It wasn't like on game day when there's like they all have the same exact logo across the bottom, and somebody screenshots it and it comes back to bite them. Okay, Bruce, you mentioned it before. You teased a little bit. We're going to do upset picks, but first, let's take a quick break. All right, we're back to finish out our pick segment, and this is where we're each going to give an upset pick. To be clear, it's not just that they cover; it's that the underdog wins. Starting with you, Bruce.
I was looking at Friday nights. There was a big one that I was like, "Ooh, am I going to pull the trigger on this?" It's a big line, and that is New Mexico at UCLA. It's 15.5. I'm probably the biggest Jason Eck believer out there. But I'm going to go in a different direction. I'm going to go in it K-State, I know they have looked bad, especially last week. They play out of Arizona. Arizona's actually a 1.5-point favorite. I don't think anybody would have expected that. Antonio Morales actually probably would have expected it. He seems to be the one guy I know on the Wildcats bandwagon since the spring. But I just think Avery Johnson's gonna shine in this game. I like
still
K-State
having confidence in
rally.
Avery Johnson, I see.
Yeah, I guess so.
I think he's been disappointing so far.
I mean, he didn't even have the ball last week. Like, I understand they lost the Army, but they ran 8 plays on the second half.
Him throwing an interception into traffic. Yeah. Sorry, go ahead, Ralph.
All right. So both Vanderbilt, which is at South Carolina, both Vanderbilt and South Carolina played Virginia Tech to open the season. Both won somewhat comfortably, but Vanderbilt tore into Virginia Tech in the second half, put up like 24 straight, I think they 24 straight points, and was explosive in doing it. Whereas South Carolina needed a punt return, was slogging along. I've been a little skeptical of South Carolina's offense in general coming into the season. LaNorris Sellers is great, but I don't know if they support him in a great way. We'll get to see more of that. We'll see how that works out. But Vanderbilt's getting 5. They look pretty explosive with Pavia last week. I'll take that 5.5 points and call for the Commodores to pull what maybe is their big upset of this season. Last year it was Alabama, so let's say this year it's the Gamecocks in Columbia, which is a tough place to play, by the way.
It is, and if to do that, I guess you're saying Diego Pavia steals the show a little bit from LaNorris Sellers, so that's frankly a bold pick, but I like it. For mine, you guys talked about Clemson a little bit when you were discussing Ralph's ballot. Definitely seems vulnerable, and they are playing Georgia Tech on the road. And I think that, I mean, we've all spoken about how highly we think of what Brent Key's doing there, but in particular, I think Clemson's offensive line is soft. And I think that Georgia Tech, who's a very physical team on both sides of the ball, can get after that. I think they can fluster Cade Klubnik, shut down their running game. Give me Georgia Tech. They are a 4-point dog. Give me Georgia Tech to win.
What do you think of that one there, Bruce? I kind of like that. I mean, I think this is a trap. I think you're falling a little too much
I'm overreacting.
Yeah, you're overreacting to Clemson's, struggles early in the season.
It's a big game for Georgia Tech. It's a good, I feel like this
it's a measuring
matters
stick
more
game.
to them. Yeah.
No doubt.
I don't. I think it's a huge game for Clemson after last weekend. I think you're looking at it going, they had a big scare in that game. And I think that, again, I don't want to put this all on Cade Klubnik, but he's an experienced quarterback, and you just see a lot of opportunities where he's had a chance to make big throws and hit some big plays. And he just seemed like he was kind of a tick off and a tick late. And that's not, I think I hate to put too much on the draft analyst world, but I think there was a lot of people who were expected coming off of last year, because he really did get better over the course of the year and looked pretty good against Texas in the playoff and kept them in the game. Felt like he was going to build on that. And again, they haven't had Antonio Williams, who's their leading receiver. He's out with hamstring issues, missed the first couple of games. Their left tackle, Tristan Lay, who is a huge recruit, who hasn't been like the 5-star I think people, expected him to be, but he hadn't been, in there much as well. So I think some of those pieces haven't come together. But again, I think this is like a big step up game for Garrett Riley, for Matt Luke, the offensive line coach, and especially for Cade Klubnik.
How much would the perception of Clemson has been built on they didn't get blown out by Texas in the playoff game? Like, it was basically a second half where they managed to hang around. And this was the reason why I was a little skeptical of Clemson coming in. And I'm going to give the guy who's been the biggest Clemson skeptic a shout out here. And that's Bill Conley, who does SP Plus for ESPN. His numbers definitely said be skeptical of Clemson. And that was one of the reasons why I became skeptical of Clemson. If they don't hit a 55-yard field goal to win the ACC championship game, like, I just feel like their entire narrative is built on, they made 6 big throws against Texas and they didn't get blown out. And it's completely changed the perception of them coming into this season when they really were just a 9-win team coming off of last season. It's just interesting how the perceptions and narratives get built from one season to another and how quickly they could have been flipped if Clemson lost the ACC championship game, as it was doing for most of the ACC championship game.
All right. And speaking of Texas, Ralph, very interesting moment Monday morning at Steve Sarkisian's press conference. And it relates to Arch Manning. Obviously, he really had a shaky debut in the season at Ohio State. There's been some chatter behind the scenes from a lot of people have heard coming out of sources out of Texas is that maybe Arch wasn't 100% coming out of fall camp. Maybe there was some concerns about his shoulder. Stu, you saw something I think that a lot of other people have picked up on that went out on social media from last weekend's game.
Yeah, there's a clip from the San Jose State game. It's a replay ESPN showed where it's like an extreme close-up, and you can see him visibly grimace in pain as he releases the ball on a pass that fell well short of his receiver, much like in the Ohio State game. So Sark was asked about that on Monday, and he had a very colorful analogy.
Arch Manning seemed to be having some throwing pains by the
According to
quarter.
who?
Arch
said that to you?
No.
Oh, according to who?
It just looked like he was.
He doesn't have any.
Is there an explanation to why it looked like that?
I don't know. I've never filmed any of you guys when you're using the bathroom, so I don't know what faces you make when you're doing that.
Yikes.
I don't know.
I mean, yeah. It would look, if he is hurt, it would definitely explain some things.
Maybe. There also is a little bit of this. And I constantly find myself going, aren't all these guys hurt all the time? Like football's a hard sport, right? Like it's just, I don't want to overreact to this stuff because we see these like small snippets and we are all now internet sleuths. So we see one small snippet of a guy like cringing. And again, football is painful. So like occasionally football players cringe. Without question, Arch hasn't been quite as good as we expected, but he was pretty good last week against San Jose State. So I guess TBD is the best way we can describe it. But, there has been some chatter out there, and I guess, again, we'll find out a little more. I would also say this, if his shoulder is a little sore, he's got about 2 weeks to get it feeling better. And there's more than enough opportunity for Sark to put him on a pitch count and hold him back, too.
Yeah, so much of that I think has to do also with so many more cameras and such better technology. Back, when we were all watching college football in our younger days, there was no HD. There was you just see the game, and plus the internet, everything gets dissected so much, as you said, Ralph. Speaking of TV, there's an interesting kind of subplot that has kind of like made its way into the college football mainstream over the past couple of weeks. Cody Campbell was on our show. He's the former Texas Tech offensive lineman turned billionaire booster turned. How do we even describe him, Ralph?
Political lobbyist.
Yeah, basically, he's a political player. I mean, he's got the ear of the president of the United States, quite frankly. So if you're a college football fan and you find yourself conjuring up memories, and I think this goes for both sides of the aisle. I think most college football fans really get exasperated during election season because their games get flooded with political ads. And if you find yourself thinking, wait, are we that close to an election? Why am I seeing all these things that look like political ads? Well, there's some politics seeping into your college sports right now. First, it was Cody Campbell's Saving College Sports commercial. We tried to explain that on The Athletic last week. I think a lot of people got familiar with that the opening weekend of the season. The second weekend of the season, during a lot of SEC games, there was another commercial supporting something called the SCORE Act. Some of you might be familiar with that. Some of you maybe not. And the SCORE Act is a bill that's been bouncing around the House and making some progress that essentially codifies the House settlement and puts some regulations around NIL. And mostly the NCAA and certainly at least two conferences, the SEC and the Big Ten, seem to support it, right? So we've been hearing like, hey, call your senator and tell him to support the SCORE Act. That was coming out of SEC country. But meanwhile, Cody Campbell and some of his supporters think that, no, the SCORE Act is bad, so you shouldn't do that. So we have this sort of political drama playing out on your Saturdays. Expect more of that in the coming weeks. I don't think that's going away, Stu.
Yeah, and I, you said this before the podcast, so I, don't want to take credit for it. It just feels icky and slimy. Like the SEC, a college football conference, taking up ad space during their games to tell you to call your congressman. There's a QR code to find out more about it. I didn't like it, but basically, all of college football, but Greg Sankey in particular, who's kind of leading the charge, are like, basically that's their plan A, B, C, and D, right? Get Congress to give us an antitrust exemption. That's it. That's their whole plan to like rein this thing in. If you could do this in like the most concise way possible, Ralph, explain to us why, if Cody Campbell wants DC to save college sports and Greg Sankey wants DC to save college sports, why does Cody Campbell not want the school? Why are they not on the same page?
Yeah, Cody Campbell's idea revolves around the College Sports Broadcasting Act. Repealing that or like reforming that would allow all of FBS to pool their television rights together. And his idea is that if you do that, it's a bigger pie for everyone and everyone makes more money, and that will be able to be used for Olympic sports and women's sports. And because he believes that those things are threatened under the current status quo, and that the SCORE Act doesn't address enough of those things. And by giving an antitrust exemption to the NCAA, you're also giving an antitrust exemption to the Big Ten and the SEC, because the new NCAA governance structure gives a lot of power to the Power Four conferences, right? So you have this, and by the way, the Big Ten and the SEC don't think they really want to pool their television rights with the rest of FBS. That doesn't seem to be a great idea to them, that Ohio State's television money should go to or help fund Wyoming or maybe even some of the Big 12 teams. So that's the best I can do to sort of sum it up. They're at odds. Both want a similar thing at the end of the rainbow. They both want a similar goal, are chasing a similar goal, but they think about how to get there in different ways.
I will say he must have a good political strategist, because I do think he's winning the messaging. I don't know, does he have enough influence? I don't know, but if you're trying to win over the public in college sports, a great way to do it is to cast the SEC as the boogeyman. Look at this thing they're trying to shove down your throat, shove through Congress. It's going to make the SEC and the Big Ten richer, and it's going to harm Olympic sports and women's sports and Texas Tech, Big 12 sports. So that's probably the way to go, honestly. But how many people actually know the minutia of the SCORE Act versus Trump's executive order? Anyway, to Ralph's point, unfortunately, I think we're going to live with these. But hey, you know what I do? Just work that remote during the commercial breaks. So we'll be back Thursday, and that's when we answer your emails. Send those questions, please, to theaudiblepod@gmail.com. And as Bruce said at the beginning, if you want to watch this podcast on YouTube, just go to youtube.com/@Audible Show. That's our channel is Audible Show. We'll see you next time.